What up, Terrapins? Welcome to another edition of Turtle Wandering. My name is E, and I like to talk to people about all things hiking, biking, camping, getting outdoors, and enjoying life. I want to talk today a little bit more about the idea of going on vacation and the fact that you work hard, you earn money, but you oftentimes don't get to see the fruits of your labor, and everybody deserves a really good vacation. But it's really hard at times when you know that your funds are tight, you're living paycheck to paycheck, and frankly, you're feeling broke AF. While I'm not paycheck to paycheck anymore, I have lived that life and I know what it's like. And so I'm hoping that I can use my past experiences and my current experiences to show all of you that you too can have a great vacation even when you're low on funds. First things first is the basics, which is figuring out kind of like what your budget is. If you're not sure about how to save money, my episode last week, which I'll leave in the comments, talks a little bit about some really passive ways to be able to save up some money. But once you have that point, then you want to create a budget. And that budget is going to be based on how many people are going. So like for me, my budget is always based off the fact that I'm a solo traveler. If you have a family, that's going to change things. If you're a couple, that's going to change things. And there's advantages and disadvantages depending on how you look at it in different situations. As a solo traveler, I only have to afford me, but by the same token, I don't get the split expenses. And so things can add up really, really quickly. Couples at least get a chance to split expenses if both of them have an income that's coming in. So those are some of the things that you want to keep in mind. You also want to think about how long do you want that trip to be? So are we talking about a long weekend? Are we talking about a week? Perhaps maybe we're even talking about 2 weeks. And of course that's also going to be dependent on whether or not you have paid time off. Because if you don't, then a long weekend might be what you're looking for, as opposed to if you maybe have 2 weeks off a year and you're like, you know what, I want to do something fun this summer. I'm going to take 5 of my days and I'm going to use that for a vacation. So you're going to want to base your budget off the idea of 5 days. When setting your budget, you're going to want to focus on 3 key areas: accommodations, transportation, and food. And so what we'll do in this video is we'll kind of break those things down, along with like having to have those extra expenses, which is kind of that miscellaneous category that really kind of helps make your vacation that extra special thing for you. Transportation is the first thing that we want to look at. And so what your transportation is going to be dependent on how far you're going and what you're hoping to accomplish on your trip. I've personally enjoyed literally using buses, Amtrak, flying, and driving during the course of vacations. And honestly, there's been trips where I've done all 4 of those things at one time, in addition to using also public transportation. So you want to kind of think about all those. If you're looking at flying, I always recommend using Google Flights. If you're driving, you have a choice. You can obviously use your own vehicle, but if you have a car that maybe is kind of like seen better days, sometimes renting a car is the best option. I like doing that because one, it's a lot of fun to get a chance to drive something that's a little bit newer and check out kind of the newer technology that I can't afford right now. But it also gives me a peace of mind that I don't have to worry about my car potentially breaking down when I'm on a trip. My personal favorites is I like using Kayak a lot and Priceline are my 2 favorites for searching for prices. Sometimes I'll also go direct, so I have an account, for instance, with Enterprise, and I will look at all 3 of those to kind of see who's coming out with the best prices. It's also a good idea to look for deals because oftentimes if you're thinking far enough ahead, you can book significantly cheaper if they're running a deal. So they might be running something for Memorial Day. And while you don't have to rent the car for Memorial Day, if you book using that code, you can still apply it for 3 weeks later. And so it's really a good opportunity to take advantage and save a lot of money. If you're not in a hurry to go somewhere, I also personally absolutely love trains. So I love checking out Amtrak and seeing what they can offer. Now, train travel in the United States is not fast compared to some of the high-speed trains that you have in Europe and other parts of the world. But you know what? It's a really nice way to kind of relax and enjoy the scenery and just kind of enjoy the ride. Most Amtrak trains also have Wi-Fi, so if that's important to you, you have that ability. I personally, because I know Wi-Fi can be spotty, I'll just download a couple movies, but it's honestly a great opportunity for me just to relax, grab a book, look out some windows, and really kind of let somebody else do the driving for me when I'm traveling. So, if you haven't ever taken a train or it's been years, I would say check out Amtrak again, because it's definitely worth your while for a really relaxing way to get to somewhere. Now, when it comes to accommodations, I'm somebody who personally doesn't mind being like bare bones. So I'm not looking for expensive hotels because I don't need to be in like luxury and have a suite or something like that. I literally just want a place that is safe to keep my things and be able to sleep at night. So I'm personally a big fan of youth hostels. And I know any of you that have ever seen the horror movie Hostel are like, there's no way I'm going to those things. But trust me, those are fiction, and hostels are absolutely outstanding. They're clean, they're safe. They always give you a place to be able to lock up your stuff so you don't have to worry about somebody stealing your things while you're there. And honestly, it's comfortable accommodations. The other nice thing about youth hostels too is that most of them have a kitchen, which means then you can go to the local grocery store, you can get yourself breakfast and lunch food and save a lot of money on the food part, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So you can save money there. And some youth hostels actually even provide free breakfast. Now, is it anything fancy? No, but a continental breakfast, you get yourself a bagel and a schmear, maybe a Danish, some coffee, some granola bars, breakfast bars, things of that nature, and you're good to go. And oftentimes you can even take, extra, you can maybe grab a breakfast bar and a piece of fruit, and you can take that as part of your lunch as well. And so you're good to go for exploring for the rest of the day. So it really helps save a lot of money. The other thing too is that a lot of hostels really do a nice job with activities. So they may offer things like free hikes, free trips to the beach. They will do things in the evening like Taco Tuesdays, which saves you money on dinner one night. They'll also do things like karaoke nights. And so all of this gives you an opportunity to be able to do other things and meet other people in a way that maybe you wouldn't. And especially as a solo or as a couples traveler, it's a really neat way to meet people from literally all over the world and have some absolutely outstanding experiences in a way that you may not have otherwise. When my last trip, one of the things that I was able to do was go to the top of Mauna Kea. Well, that's something that I wouldn't have personally done myself. One, because the rental car that I had, one wouldn't have taken the trip, and it also wasn't rated for that. But the hostel worker was like, hey, I'm going to take some people. Would you like to go along with me? And that was a great opportunity. It was the most amazing, beautiful sunset I have ever seen in my entire life. And I got to share it with some people that I still have a relationship now with to today. If youth hostels seem just a little bit too crunchy and granola for you, there's always Airbnbs. Now, the thing about it is Airbnbs or those sort of housing shares, some people aren't real crazy about the model. It's also not legal in certain cities. So I know in New York City, in Minneapolis, they're not legal. So even the one that I stayed in that technically was Minneapolis was actually outside of the city limits because they don't allow that inside of those cities. So you always have to keep that in mind. Sometimes in bigger cities, what you might run into are things like what they call pod shares, which is taken from something that happens a lot in like Japan and other countries where it's like you get, again, it's very, very tight spaces and it's not a lot, but it's a safe place for you to basically be able to sleep and stow your gear. So again, there are options out there. The last place to sleep that honestly is super cheap is being able to stay at a friend or family's house. Now, it would be helpful if you like, say, said family, and with your friends, you certainly don't want to impose on people. But I've had situations where basically what I've done is I've already booked a trip because I wanted to visit an area and I wanted to see that person. And so I'm thinking about when I went to both to Montana and then also when I went to Tulsa. And in both cases, I said, hey, I'm going to be in your town for a couple of days. I'd love to be able to see you. And in return, their comment was, please come stay with me. Which, one, makes you feel good inside that like, oh, they actually want to spend extra time with me, but it's also really nice because then you get that extra local flavor. You get a chance to meet somebody's family, their friends, and really experience a location in a way that you may not otherwise. So don't be afraid to utilize your friends. But again, you don't want to impose on them, but opening the door for that is a possibility. Last but not least is the food part. And as I mentioned before, especially if you're able to use things like a youth hostel or if you're doing an Airbnb that gives you use of the kitchen, and a lot of them do, even if you're just staying like in a room in somebody's house, it saves you a ton of money if you take care of your own breakfast and lunch. Now, when I travel, it just happens that I'm not a big breakfast eater, so it really doesn't apply so much to me. So generally, as long as I have a coffee, I'm good to go. And a lot of those places will also have coffee, or again, you can buy like a small bag of coffee for yourself, and you can make that every morning, and then you are good to go. But only purchasing dinner really is going to save you a lot of cash, and really it's also going to allow you then to kind of treat yourself at dinner time and maybe go to some really neat restaurants that if you want to save money, what you do is you ask the locals, whether it is your Airbnb host or the folks that own the hostel or anybody even that you randomly meet during your adventures, and find out like, hey, where do you like to eat? What's the best of this particular type of cuisine, or what's your area known for? And by asking those questions, they're going to tell you not the tourist traps, but the places that they go. And I can guarantee you, when you take that sort of advice, you are going to get some absolutely slamming food at a really good price. And so you're going to end up really kind of eating as the locals do, and you're going to have a much better experience than anybody else that went to whatever the local tourist traps were. First of all, you're probably going to... The other thing that you're going to want to make sure that you set aside money for is just kind of your miscellaneous. And so that can be whatever. It can be things like souvenirs or just random stuff that comes up. So, you know, again, if you're renting a car, you're going to need to, well, put gas in said rental car. If you're driving, again, you're going to have to do that. You may have to pay for parking in certain places. You may want to get a drink or a coffee or something. Or, you know, I've had on more than one occasion where I've gotten eaten alive by mosquitoes and whatnot. And, well, I've ended up frequently drugstores to get things like Afterbite, extra bug spray, things like that, because sometimes you can't carry that stuff in your carry-on bags, and I don't check bags because that's another way to save money, is to only use carry-ons. So I end up having to then pick that stuff up, and so you want to account for that when you're thinking about your money. And then again, as I mentioned, souvenirs. So in the last video, I talked about the fact that I like to go to local coffee roasters when I travel. So I guarantee that I will bring back several bags of coffee. And so I want to budget for that. I also like bringing back at least a t-shirt or two from my travels. And that just kind of goes back to the memories from when my parents traveled when I was a kid. And they always brought me back really cool t-shirts from all over the world. From the business trips that my dad and my mother would take. And so it's kind of a way of continuing that. I also have a collection of shot glasses and pint glasses. And so I like to look for ones that are different or fun and bring those back. So again, I always want to account for a little bit of extra money. And then, you know, if I want to bring back some gifts for my friends or my family, I want to have the freedom to be able to do that without stressing out about, oh, I don't have that. And so, you know, as I mentioned last time, I have side hustles, and oftentimes my side hustles allow me to be able to do that. Now, this last piece is not so much about saving money, but you deciding kind of when and where you want to splurge, because there's going to be certain things that maybe you don't want to go on the cheap. So I mentioned airline flights, and certainly flights, you can go like super low budget, except for oftentimes those aren't as cheap as you think they are, because when you look, all you can bring is like what they consider to be a carry-on item, which is a personal item, but not actually a carry-on bag that like would be in an overhead compartment. If you want to have any overhead storage, you're paying for that extra. And so you want to keep that in mind. So when I filter, I automatically put in that, yes, I want to have an overhead storage. So I'm going to pay a little bit extra for that. It's also really important for me personally to be able to choose my seat, because I want to be able to get up and move around, especially if it's going to be a longer flight. But even a shorter flight, if I just want to get up and use the restroom or stretch my legs, something of that nature, or even just have a little extra leg room, I'm willing to pay extra to choose my seat. And a lot of airlines, that's what you have to do now, is either they will assign you or you can choose, but again, it's going to cost you a little bit extra. So for me, that's worth the extra, like say $30 or so that it's gonna cost me to be able to do that. Another one of the things that I like to do is I want to be able to pay for occasional like excursions while I'm on a trip. You know, again, I love biking, I love hiking, so hiking pretty much you can do for free, or worst case scenario, you're paying like a fee to go to like one of the national parks. The nice thing is once you pay the fee for the park, it's good for the entire week. So you save a lot of money because you're not paying to go in every single day. And sometimes you even luck out, because going back to the hostel thing, when I went to Volcano National Park, I ended up not actually paying to go in that day, neither did my hostel mates, because what ended up happening was somebody else at the hostel had been to the park And as I mentioned, the passes are usually good for 5 to 7 days. And so he had gone for 2 days and then was like, listen, I'm not going back to the park. Here, you can have this pass. And so he passed that along to us. And so then we were able to use that pass. And then so we went to the park for a day. And then afterwards, we passed it on to somebody else. So it was just kind of a pay it forward sort of a situation. But I don't mind paying for certain things. So for instance, when I went to Minnesota, I paid for a bike tour around the city. And so it was somebody who was a historian of the city that took us around. They gave you a bike, they fitted you for a bike, and then they fitted you with a helmet that actually had a speaker in it. So as the person was talking, you could hear them very, very clearly. And so we were able to like kind of look around, take pictures, and explore the city by bike in a way that we wouldn't have by foot because you could cover a lot more area. Same thing when I went to Hawaii last January, that was for my birthday. And part of it was that I wanted to explore something a little bit different. And on my actual birthday, I kind of just didn't want to spend my birthday by myself. So what I did was I was able to find a tour that was a tour of Volcano National Park, but then also provided lunch and dinner at a winery. And so we had a wonderful tour guide who would take us in a van to a couple different spots, getting close to the volcano, and told us a lot of really interesting history about the islands as a whole, going back to when they were completely indigenously lived at, and then what happened during the course of colonization and how that changed the islands over time. Got to see parts of the island that I wouldn't have known to even look for. We were able to pick his brain about places to go in the future. So even things like poke, we asked him like, where's the best place to get poke? And surprisingly, he told us it was one of the local grocery chains because they tended to have the freshest stuff and they also had the best prices. And I think we were all thinking that you would go to restaurants. And then we were able to go to this absolutely beautiful winery that's on the volcano, that's actually called Volcano Winery, and have an absolutely fabulous barbecue dinner. There was a wine tasting. They also grow tea there, so they were able to also offer us a tea tasting. And it was really a lot of fun to do that. And so to me, that was worth the extra cost. I've also done things like snorkeling and other sorts of activities. So again, building in that little bit of extra money to be able to do those extra trips is totally worth it. Well, I see that the sun is setting behind me, so I think now is a good time to wrap up this video before I lose all this wonderful outdoor light. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you're able to use at least a couple of the tips that I've shared today and take a fabulous vacation because, again, you work really hard. You deserve time off, and you want to realize that in your life that you're just not like living to work. You want to be able to work to be able to live and to do things. And again, it's tough. But I really think that if you take a little bit of time, do a little bit of planning, you're going to be able to have an absolutely fabulous vacation this summer. So with that, everyone be well. See you later, Terrapins.